Chat, shall we watch another WillE video? I was hoping that me reacting to that video was... After the video, the rate's full. But no, what happened is we're 17 people. I guess I got nothing else to do. I'm muting the music again and I'm reacting. Sorry guys, I'm stalling here. Alright, this is WillE video. Ulduar, best raid ever or simply overrated?
Trial of the Grand Crusader now released, it's once again got to that point in World of Warcraft where we have passed Ulduar as the main raid tier of the expansion. And I think that we can say for those who wanted to experience this legendary raid, you have certainly had your chance to do so. And whilst Ulduar's re-release in 2023 was quite different to how it was back in 2009, so are many other things in WoW Classic. Biggest of all, the player base. Today I wanted to do a review of Ulduar in hindsight. There have been few raids as hyped up as this one, so did it live up to its lofty expectations, or was it a little bit overrated? Back in 2008, Naxxramas' re-release had the highest clear rate out of any raid ever. It did make sense to bring it back though, seeing as how barely anyone cleared it during vanilla, and Blizzard wanted to make things a lot more accessible the second time around.
This guy used to work for Overwatch, right? What is his name?
And they certainly achieved that. Hardcore guilds cleared the content 2 days after the expansion released. And many more casual players would follow in the weeks and months to come. Whilst this was a simple step into raiding, which allowed more players to see the content, it lacked the challenge for higher end players to push towards. Ulduar would change this with a new, innovative raiding format, hard mode. The majority of bosses would have some kind of out or in-fight interaction that could be done to activate a more difficult version of the same fight. On XT you destroyed the heart, on Iron Council you did the bosses in a different order, and on Vezax you had your raid AFKing dodging shadow crashes for a minute straight. Well, you do these days anyway, more on that later though. There was also the Yogg-Saron fight, where players could use a range of keepers to aid them, and Algalon, who had 1 hour worth of attempts per reset. And unlike many hard raids that had come before Ulduar, this one had no time gating, no resistance checking counters, and no suddenly needing double the amount of tanks you usually do. It was just plain difficult content on hard mode, and more accessible on normal. This is part of what gives the raid its legacy. It was the first real attempt by Blizzard to incorporate harder, optional modes into the majority of a raid, and for their first attempt, it worked pretty well. These days though, we've had plenty of changes too. There were new achievements added such as ahead of the curve for defeating Yogg, or cutting edge for having done all hard modes. The item level of non-tier loot was buffed across the board. Where 25-man hard mode used to be 239, now it was 252. This represented a significant power buff for all players across the board, and keeps certain BIS items in Ulduar relevant, even though we are now in Trial of the Grand Crusader. But the single biggest change was moving the raid to its pre-nerf difficulty. So when Blizzard initially announced Wrath of the Lich King, they said there were no plans to do any pre-nerf content in the expansion, but out of every raid during the expansion, Ulduar underwent a ton of different nerfs, from boss damage being lowered, boss health being lowered, and certain mechanics being straight up removed. And as we approach this raid in Classic, I am thankful that Blizz did decide after all to go down the route of pre-nerf. Although for a Classic raid, Ulduar has been the most challenging so far, as very much predicted by many of us. I've been tracking the number of successful clears in each raid after the second reset has gone by for a long time now. It's just out of interest really to see how each raid is stacking up. Whilst the Sunwell or Serpent Shrine Cavern and Tempest Keep both saw thousands of clears by the end of the second reset, many of Ulduar's hard modes were well below the 4-digit mark, with bosses such as Hodir, Mimiron, Iron Council, and Algalon being seen as very challenging. Let's not forget there was...
Is this after 2 weeks? It's gotta be, right?
A pre-nerf hard mode that was never defeated, the mathematically impossible XT002 hard mode, whose hard mode bonus health was nerfed down from 90% bonus to 40%. In other words, Blizzard had to reduce the boss's health by about 12.5 million, which for Wrath of the Lich King is a big number. Kel'Thuzad 25 in Nax had just under 50 mil health. Whilst I enjoyed the extra challenge and progression, there was no denying that Ulduar also felt like a departure from what Classic raiding has been so far. Classic has had its moments where you wipe a lot, Muru for example, but nothing on the consistent level of difficulty that Ulduar presented. I think Lich King 25 Heroic 0 buff will be the next big hurdle for guilds to overcome, and then in Cataclysm, assuming we get it, the difficulty starts to get far more extreme. It's not anything on the same level as modern day Mythic raiding, don't get me wrong, but it's another advancement in making raiding more and more challenging, a trend that can...
Kata's gonna be too hard for people. Like I'm just saying, like Kata's gonna be too hard. Like the boomer casuals, they're just gone in Kata. Yeah, like, there's just no way they can do heroic. There's no chance.
Continues the longer
Like,
World
just,
of Warcraft advances.
No,
there was also quite the drop-off week to week as Ulduar progressed, and that could have had something to do with its difficulty. Or then again, maybe it was people touching grass in summer, or maybe it's the fact that Ulduar released on January 19th and Trial of the Grand Crusader came out on June 24th. Between those two dates is 22 resets of Ulduar. Now, I will say Blizzard actively had a goal to make Ulduar relevant content for longer than it was on its original release.
22
Back
resets!
In the day, Trial of the Grand Crusader came out, and the easily
I think I survived
2,
like
4,
10.
5 item level loot from 10
like 10
heroic or
resets before I
25 normal made the prospect of going to do Ulduar hard modes for up to 239 item level gear, well, just not all that appealing. But I will say these days 22 resets was definitely a bit on the long side. Still, you'd think with 22 resets gone by, we would all be in our bis by now and just patiently waiting for Trial of the Grand Crusader to come out. And oh boy, how wrong would you be? Which leads to probably my single biggest issue with Ulduar: hard mode loot. So when you do a boss on heroic mode, all the loot is heroic and of the same item level. This makes pretty much everything useful to some degree. Every item may not be bis, but you can fill the gaps
one
with
item
things
and
that
that's
drop
it.
because a lot of them come down to a stat difference. When you defeat a hard mode boss, you get one hard mode item, and that's on either 10 or 25 man. Each boss, remember, has multiple possible hard mode drops, so the chance you get the thing you want is not very good. Anyone else already feel like they've seen more Death's Verdict than Flare of the Heavens? And of course the rest of the loot you get apart from your one hard mode item is just normal mode loot. The one exception to this was of course Algalon, whose entire loot table was hard mode
like
items.
4 flares.
But then again, when Ulduar was the current raid, he was both very difficult and had a 1-hour timer before he would despawn for the week. I know not everyone should always be in their bis gear, but at least with heroic you have several chances from each boss to see the item you want, and not one. I think with the recent changes to Ulduar, Blizzard could have considered bosses now dropping 2 hard mode items.
Yeah, I said that a
one.
few days ago.
Also, it would have been good to have a better indicator in-game of which items are from hard mode. Heroic items say so on their tooltip, but hard mode items don't for some reason. I mean, yes, there are add-ons that do this, but it just seems like something that would have made sense to do. On to the bosses then. There were some that held up well and some other ones. I have to say the normal mode bosses started to feel somewhat out of place after a while. I'm not sure why Blizzard back in the day opted to keep certain bosses normal mode only when every boss has a normal mode anyways. Did they quite possibly just run out of time in making the raid here? All the same, I don't hate the normal mode bosses, they just end up feeling like minor road bumps where you press all your cooldowns and just delete them. I'll also say I got the first real sense of progression on a fight during Yogg 0. In the early resets the DPS check was very high, with many successful guilds bringing 6 to 7 affliction locks to meet the DPS needed in the last phase, which is exactly how this fight was defeated back in the day, by the way. Algalon was also interesting, but from a DPS point of view, you kind of just hit the boss whilst the tanks, Starkillers, and healers did the actual work. On to the not so good bosses then. The first one that comes to mind is Hodir. I may have had a rant in the past where I called it one of the worst designed bosses of all time, and to be fair, visually the fight is a complete mess.
It is a bit stupid that you have to wipe it,
clearly in the encounter whatsoever. But once you understand the mess and know how to make the most of the various buffs, you can do some insane damage. And the
like, it would have made way more sense if like you hit a button before you pull Hodir, and after 2 minutes, if the boss is not dead yet, he just one-shots the whole raid. Instead of having to like, okay, wipe it. Ah, we're gonna make it. No, stop DP. Like, remember Lulek, bro. Lulek, the fucking legend, right? The boss is at 2% health, and he calls on Discord, stop DPS. I told you stop DPS. And then we kill. Of course we kill. It was 2%. Like, dude. And he's yelling at us because we didn't stop DPS. Like, dude. And this happened many times where we actually accidentally killed the boss. Remember Fusion, guys? It's like one of the best skills, right? They killed Hodir in like 2 minutes and 3 seconds or something on the first week, so they couldn't do Yogg 0. You couldn't do Yogg 0 if you killed... Or Algolon or some shit, right? Like you just... No, you could do Yogg 0. No, you couldn't do Algolon. You couldn't do yeah, Algolon. Something. Like you couldn't do something if you didn't kill him on hard mode the first week. I think it's because you didn't do the quest, right? They got fucked, basically. Yeah, they got fucked.
1 minute 30 or less.
That was pretty
due to
stupid.
The hard mode timer. So, you know
That's
what?
kind of funny, though.
Hodir, not so bad.
But yeah, wiping
mode,
and then
however,
this boss.
Okay, we're going to do a new rant here. Whose idea was it to design a boss where you kind of have to point your camera towards the ceiling a little bit for the entire raid night? I know DBM handles warnings fairly well now, but imagine progressing this back in the day. Also, it's got the longest run back if you do wipe by an enormous margin. The shattered walkway teleporter might as well be in a different postcode. And that's before we even get to the hard mode modification for the fight, where it takes 4 minutes total for the ad to spawn. And for most guilds nowadays, you burn the boss down to 5% health and then you have to stop and sort of AFK whilst dodging shadow crashes because you need the ad to spawn for hard mode. On top of that, this boss drops a caster trinket as one of its hard mode items, which with its incredibly buffed item level is good for just about everyone that uses spells, meaning you're going to be coming back to this absolute disaster of a boss fight for a long time to come. Most bosses were pretty fun though. Freya was good, I like the different order of the ads that could spawn in and changing your strategy around that. And Mimiron's final phase was chaotic, but fun to see who could dodge mines, fires, shock blasts, barrage, missiles, and the firebots. The next
that guy's getting hit by the frost.
Expansion, to be honest, and not just Ulduar, but it could really use some more consistent boss aggro ranges, and for players to not enter combat until somebody in the raid has. I know it's a small thing, but pre-potting exists now, and can you tell me when the right time to pre-pot is on Algolon after a wipe? Because it seems to me like he just puts you in combat at some point before you can hit
it's
him.
random.
And on boss range, certain bosses, such as Hodir, you can be pretty much 20 yards away from, and others, like Freya, will aggro if you even so much think about hitting a trash pack within 40 yards of her. Overall though, I think Ulduar has held up as a very solid raid. The progression fights on launch are a ton of fun, with many memorable boss encounters for both the right and wrong reasons. 22 resets was definitely on the long side. It could have been a good 3 or so less, maybe even more. The overall theme, music, and ambience were great, as is very much expected from those areas of Blizzard's design team. The normal mode bosses ended up feeling a bit out of place, to be honest, and the hard mode loot system just really wasn't it for me. Too much RNG in seeing a usable item. Despite all this, Ulduar has to be up there alongside the Sunwell as one of the top raids in Classic so far for me. I can't wait to see everything ICC Heroic has to offer now. I did a few of the bosses
I had more
on
fun
Heroic
doing
back
Sunwell
in the day, but I'm not going to have really done Wrath as an expansion until I've done Lich King 25 Heroic. But those are just my thoughts on Ulduar. What do you reckon for its re-release? Did Blizzard get anything wrong here? And has it lived up to your expectations? Let me know below. And it
really comes down to one thing. It's just reward. You weren't rewarded that much for Ulduar in my opinion. Because of the one hard mode loot per boss. If the bosses had a hard mode and in Sunwell you kill a boss and he drops like insanely best loot for the rest of the game. Yeah, it's probably not fair to compare a non-end tier raid with Sunwell. So like I don't think it's a fair comparison, but like Sunwell felt way more rewarding than Ulduar. But Ulduar was rewarding in the beginning though. But like after some time, you just want to get the hard mode loot, and it's so scarce. How many times have you killed General Vazax, right? And this piece of shit drops, or this piece of shit. Yeah. Like, bro, it's just like 40% of the loot from this guy is complete dog shit. It's like, what is this? Or like Delirium's Touch. The good old combo, guys. Insanity's Grip versus Delirium Touch. Alright, wait, what? I'm coming on a different character, guys. I've been told to leave the raid because they don't want me to tank the raid because of my streamerness, where I might get distracted and wipe the raid.